Malcolm,
Are you prepared to go into the United Nations at this point and ask that charges be brought against the United States for its treatment of American Negroes?
Oh, yes. Number one, of the black man in America is beyond America's ability to solve. It's a human problem, not an American problem or a Negro problem. And as a human problem or a world problem, we feel that it should be taken out of the jurisdiction of the United States government and the United States courts.
We want freedom by any means necessary. We want justice by any means necessary. We want equality by any means necessary. We don't feel that in 1964, living in a country that is supposedly based upon freedom and supposedly the leader of the free world, we don't think that we should have to sit around and wait for some segregationist congressmen and senators and a president from Texas in Washington, D.C. to make up their mind that our people are due now some degree of civil rights. No, we want it.
Uhuru. Welcome to We Charge Colonialism, Black August edition. I am Ikemba Ojore, a community organizer and host of We Charge Colonialism Media. Black August is honored every year to commemorate the fallen freedom fighters of the Black Liberation Movement, to call for the release of political prisoners in the United States, to condemn the oppressive conditions of U.S. prisons, and to emphasize the continued importance of the Black liberation struggle. Observers of Black August commit to higher levels of discipline throughout the month. This can include fasting from food and drink, frequent physical exercise and political study, and engagement in political struggle. In short, the principles of Black August are study, fast, train, and fight. During the COVID shutdown, myself with other organizers launched the first Black August Power Hour study by examining George Jackson's Blood in My Eye. We are reviving the Black August Power Hour study with Brother Malcolm X, and we have reached out to organizers within the Black Liberation Movement to participate. We will be meeting every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time to analyze and discuss the philosophy of Malcolm X. Do join us on YouTube or Facebook for this special commemoration of Black August and Black resistance. Our goal is for organizers within the Black Liberation Movement to unpack Brother Malcolm X's views on colonial capitalism in a contemporary context, to unpack resistance in the movement against colonialism from the lens of Minister Malcolm X. We will be reading select texts and discussing related questions to uplift the historical events that has taken place throughout the month of August. Now, welcome to the Black August Power Hour. All right, peace and Black power. Appreciate everybody that's tuning in right now. Make sure that you like and share this podcast, and make sure you subscribe. If this is your first time joining us, subscribe to the channel. My name is Ikemba Ojore. We charge colonialism, and we're back with our third session of the Black Power Hour here every Tuesday and Thursday. I'm here with Tone, who will be facilitating the discussion that will be happening on Zoom. But before we get into the reading, and we're going to pick up where we left off at with Malcolm X's last speech, as we're going to read and examine that speech and have a discussion all within this hour. But before we do that, I want to uplift Dr. Mutulu Shakur. Long live Dr. Mutulu Shakur, who transitioned on the 7th of July. But today is his born day. And I just wanted to quickly read a bio of Dr. Mutulu Shakur. He has I don't think we have enough time to really go into what Dr. Mutulu Shakur has meant to the Black liberation struggle and all that he has done for Black people. But I think it's important that we do speak of Dr. Mutulu Shakur before we even get into our session today. So Dr. Mutulu Shakur was born on August the 8th, 1950. His nationality is a New African. Dr. Mutulu Shakur is a New African whose primary work has been in the area of health. He was a doctor in acupuncture and was a co-founder and director of 2 institutions devoted to improving healthcare in the Black community. Dr. Mutulu was born on August 8th, 1950 in Baltimore, Maryland, as Gerald Wayne Williams. At age 7, he moved to Jamaica, Queens, New York City with his mother and younger sister. His political and social consciousness began to develop early in his life. His mother suffered not only from being Black and female, but was also blind. These elements constituted Mutulu's first confrontation with the state, while assisting his mother to navigate through the maze, making up the social service system. Through this experience, Dr. Mutulu learned that the system did not operate in the interests of Black people, and that Black people must control the institutions that affect their lives. Since at the age of 16, Dr. Mutulu has been a part of the New African Independence movement. As part of this movement, he became a target of the illegal counterintelligence program carried out by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, COINTELPRO. This was a secret police strategy used in the U.S. starting in the 1960s to destroy and neutralize progressive and revolutionary organizations. It is believed that Dr. Mutulu's resistance to this program led to his arrest and trial. During the late 60s, Dr. Mutulu was politically active and worked with the Revolutionary Action Movement as a Black nationalist group that struggled for Black self-determination and socialist change in America. He was a member of the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, which endorsed the founding of an independent New African Republic and the establishment of an independent Black state in the southern U.S. Dr. Mutulu also worked very closely with the Black Panther Party, supporting Lumumba and Zaire Shakur. So I'm going to stop there and share my screen. Long live Dr. Mutulu Shakur. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get into our reading today. Again, appreciate everybody that's joining us. Make sure you like and share this podcast so we get as many people to view this important commemoration of Black August and our brother Malcolm X. And I'm looking for you now. Is this it? All right. So everyone that's on Zoom, you should be able to be heard right now. And I'm going to ask for everybody that's viewing, if you can let us know that you can hear our comrades reading this excerpt from Malcolm X, which y'all can get right into it. Tone, I'm passing it to you.
Thank you. Peace, everyone. Brother Khalid is going to start us with the reading on page 695, which is where we left off last week. And we will end at the end of the speech. Brother Khalid, I will prompt you if you are unsure. So please start reading.
Okay. Peace be upon you. Thank you, everyone. Quote, start. One of the shrewd ways that they use the press to project us in the eye or image of a criminal, they take statistics. And with the press, they feed these statistics to the public, primarily the white public, because there are some well-meaning persons in the white public as well as bad-meaning persons in the white public. And whatever the government is going to do, it always wants the public on its side, whether it's the local government, state government, federal government. So they use the press to create images. And at the local level, they are creating an image by feeding statistics to the press, through the press showing the high crime rate in the Negro community. As soon as this high crime rate is emphasized through the press, then people begin to look upon the Negro community as a community of criminals. And then any Negro in the community can be stopped in the street. Put your hands up and they pat you down. You might be a doctor, a lawyer, a preacher, or some other kind of Uncle Tom. But despite your professional standing, you'll find that you're the same victim as the man who's in the alley. Just because you're Black and you live in a Black community, which has been projected as a community of criminals. This is done, and once the public accepts this image also, it paves the way for a police state type of activity in the Negro community. They can use any kind of brutal methods to suppress Blacks because they're criminals anyway. And what has given this image? The press, again, by letting the power structure or the racist element in the power structure use them in that way. A very good example was the riots that took place here during the summer. I was in Africa. I read about them over there. If you'll notice, they referred to the rioters as vandals, hoodlums, thieves. They tried to make it appear that this wasn't. They tried to make it, and they did this. They skillfully took the burden off the society for its failure to correct these negative conditions in the Black community. It took the burden completely off the society and put it right on the community by using the press to make it appear that the looting and all of this was proof that the whole act was nothing but vandals and robbers and thieves who weren't really interested in anything other than that which was negative. But I hear many old, dumb, brainwashed Negroes who parrot the same old party line that the man handed down in his paper. It was not the case that they were just knocking out store windows ignorantly. In Harlem, for instance, all the stores are owned by white people. All of the buildings are owned by white people. Black people are just there, paying rent, buying the groceries. But they don't own the stores, clothing stores, food stores, any kind of stores. Don't even own the homes that they live in. This is all owned by outsiders. And then these rundown apartment dwellings, the Black man in Harlem pays more money for it than the man down in the rich Park Avenue section. It costs us more money to live in the slum than it costs them to live down on Park Avenue. Black people in Harlem know this. And the white merchants charge us more money for food in Harlem. And it's the cheap food. It's the worst food. And we have to pay more money for it than the man has to pay for it downtown. So Black people know that they're being exploited and that their blood is being sucked and they see no way out of it. So finally, when the thing is sparked, the white man is not there. He's gone. The merchant is not there. The landlord is not there. The one he considers to be the enemy isn't there. So they knock at his property. This is what makes them knock down the store windows and set fire to things and the things of that sort. It's not that they're thieves, but they try and project the image to the public that this is being done by thieves and thieves alone. They ignore the fact that no, it is not thievery alone. It's a corrupt, vicious, hypocritical system that has castrated the Black man. And the only way the Black man can get back at it is to strike it in the only way he knows how. They use the press. That doesn't mean that all reporters are bad. Some of them are good, I suppose. But you can take their collective approach to any problem and see that they can always agree when it gets to you and me. They know that this affair, which is designed to honor outstanding Black Americans, is it not? You find nothing in newspapers to give the slightest hint that this affair was going to take place, not one hint. Why? You see, you have many sources of news. If you don't think that they're in cahoots, watch. They are interested, or none of them are interested. It's not a staggering thing. They're not going to say anything in advance that's being given by any Black people who believe in functioning beyond the scope of the ground rules that are laid down by the liberal element of the power structure. When you begin to start thinking for yourself, you frighten them, and they try and block your getting to the public for fear that if the public listens to you, then the public won't listen to them anymore. And they've got certain Negroes whom they have to keep blowing up in the papers to make them look like leaders, so that the people will keep on following them, no matter how many knocks they get on their heads following them. This is how the man does it. And if you don't wake up and find out how he does it, I tell you, they'll be building gas chambers and gas ovens pretty soon. I don't mean those kinds you got at home in your kitchen. Another example at the international level of how skillfully they used this trickery was in the Congo. In the Congo, airplanes were dropping bombs on African villages. African villages don't have a defense against bombs. And the pilot can't tell who the bomb is being dropped upon. When a bomb hits a village, everything goes. And these pilots, flying planes filled with bombs, dropping these bombs on African villages, were destroying women, were destroying children, were destroying babies. You never heard any outcry over here about that. And it had started way back in June. They would drop bombs on African villages that would blow their village apart and everything in it. Man, woman, child, and baby. No outcry, no sympathy, no support, no concern, because the press didn't project it in such a way that it would be designed to get your sympathy. They know how to put something so that you'll sympathize with it, and they know how to put it so you'll be against it. I'm telling you, they are masters at it. And if you don't develop the analytical ability to read between the lines and what they're saying, I'm telling you again, they'll be building gas ovens, and before you wake up, you'll be in one of them. Just like the Jews ended up in gas ovens over there in Germany. You're in a society that's just as capable of building gas ovens for black people as Hitler's society was. This was mass murder in the Congo of women and children and babies. There was no outcry even from the white liberals, even from your friends. Why? Because they made it appear that it was a humanitarian project. They said that the planes were being flown by American-trained anti-Castro Cuban pilots. This is propaganda too. As soon as you hear that it's American-trained, you say, oh, that's all right, that's us. And the anti-Castro Cubans, oh, that's all right too. Because if they're against Castro, whoever else they're against, that's good. Because Castro is a monster. But you see how step by step by step, they grab your mind. And these pilots are hired. Their salaries are paid by the United States government. They're called mercenaries, these pilots are. And a mercenary is not someone who kills you because he's patriotic. He kills you for blood money. He's a hired killer. This is what a mercenary means. And they're able to take these hired killers, put them in American planes with American bombs and drop them on African villages, blowing to bits black men, black women, black children, black babies, and you black people sitting over here cool like it doesn't even involve you. You're a fool. They'll do it to them today and do it to you tomorrow, because you and I and they are all the same. They call it a humanitarian project, and that they're doing it in the name of freedom. In all of this, these glorious terms are used to pave the way in your mind for what they're going to do. They take Tashambi. You've heard of Tashambi. He's the worst African that was ever born, the lowest type that was ever born. He's a murderer himself. He's the murderer of Lumumba, the former prime minister of the first and only rightful prime minister of the Congo. He's a murderer with an international stature as a murderer. Yet the United States government went and got Tashambi in Spain and put him as the head of the Congolese government. This is criminal. Here's a man who's a murderer, so the United States takes him, puts him over to Congo, and supports his government with your tax dollars. Now, they hired him to occupy the position as head of state over the Congo, a killer. He is a hired killer himself. His salary is paid by the United States government, and his first move is to bring in South Africans who hate everything in sight. He hires those South Africans to come and kill his own Congolese people. And the United States, again, pays their salary. You know, it's something to think about. How do you think you would feel right now if some Congolese brothers walked up to you and they look just like you, don't think you don't look Congolese? You look as much Congolese as a Congolese does. They got all kinds of Congolese over there. How would you feel if one of them walked up to you and asked you about what your government is doing in the Congo? I was asked that when I was over there, but they don't have to come to me like that because they know where I stand automatically. And for one time, I'm thankful to the press for letting everybody know where I stand. But you have no explanation. Your tongue stays in your mouth, and then you have to go to the extreme to convince them that you don't go along with what the United States government is doing in the Congo. And they justify the usage of Tashambe as the present head of state by saying that he's the only African who can unite or bring unity. I apologize now, there's some difficulty with the screen. Thank you. Or bring unity to the Congo, as he brought unity to the Congo. But see, this is their game. And their real reason for wanting Dushanbe there was so that Dushanbe could invite them to come in. Now, what African head of state would have dared to invite outside powers? So they put Dushanbe there, and as soon as Dushanbe got there, he invited them to bring paratroopers from Belgium in the United States transport planes to try and recapture Congo. This is all a cold-blooded act on the part of your Western powers, namely the Western powers here in the United States. Interests in the United States and England and France and Belgium and so forth. They want the wealth of the Congo plus its strategic geographic position. The step-by-step process that was used by the press. First, they fan the flame in such a manner to create hysteria in the mind of the public. And then they shift gears and fan the flame in a manner designed. Scroll up, please. To get the sympathy of the public. And once they go from hysteria to sympathy, the next step is to get the public to support them in whatever act they're getting ready to go down with. You're dealing with a cold, calculating international machine that's so criminal in its objectives and motives that it has the seeds of its own destruction right within. They use the press to empathize that white hostages are being held, or white priests, white missionaries, white nuns. They don't say nuns, white nuns. You know what the paper said right here in Detroit. White missionaries, not just a missionary, a white nun. As if there's a difference between a white nun and a black nun, or a white priest and a black priest, or if the light that's in a white skin is more valuable than the light within a black skin. This is what they're implying in the press. Look at the press when this thing is going on, and you will see what I'm talking about. They're vicious in their whiteness. But still, I wouldn't judge them just because they're white or they call me a racist. I'm judging by their deeds, by their conscious behavior. And you know how they've been consciously behaving in the Congo and how they consciously behave in Vietnam and how they consciously behave right now in Alabama and Mississippi. So you and I got to get conscious and start behaving in a way that we can offset this thing before it's too late. And this is what they don't want to hear. One more thing concerning Dushanbe. If you notice, while we were over there on the African continent, in order to give you a better understanding of what is going on right here, the next thing that is good to know about Dushanbe, no Congolese troops have ever won any victories whatsoever for the present Congolese government. Congolese soldiers won't even fight unless they're forced to. But the fighters in the Congo, or the freedom fighters, the rebels from the Oriental Eastern province, they fought with stones and sticks and rocks, spears and arrows. And the only time they had a gun was when they got some soldier who had it and they kill him and take his gun. But they weren't winning. They took over 2/3 of the Congo. I'm showing you they were fighting from their hearts. The other people, their heart wasn't in it. And because of the fighting spirit of these people, it will be impossible for Dushanbe to remain as head of state over the Congo without additional troops, white troops, being constantly brought in from South Africa or elsewhere. But sooner or later, these troops are going to give out. And that America is going to have to increase her troops like she did in South Vietnam. She's not at war with Vietnam yet. She's only there advising. They have 20,000 advisors, on the front lines. But it's not a war, just they're in advisory capacity. While they insult the intelligence of their own public. And they're going to have to end up doing the same thing in the Congo. They'll be trapped. They'll have to eventually send American troops to occupy the Congo because the African freedom fighters are going to fight. They're not going to give up 1 inch without fighting back. If there's something that you should know, that they realize now on the African continent what's at stake and how much what these Western powers have in common and what they're doing in cahoots with each other behind the closed doors. And so on the African continent, they are training Africans, these soldiers, so they can invade one of these countries and take it over and give it to the rightful people. One of the last things I must say concerning the Congo, not only do they not intend for the Congo to fall into African hands because of its mineral wealth, and it has the greatest deposits of some of the richest elements or minerals of any other area on this earth. They don't intend to give it up because of its wealth. Another reason they don't intend to give it up is if you look at the map, you'll see that it is so strategically located geographically. Wherein, if a real genuine African government were to come in power over the Congo, then it would be possible for African troops from all countries to invade Angola, which is a Portuguese possession. And if Angola fell, and it would fall, then it would only be a matter of time before Southwest Africa, Southern Rhodesia, and Bechuanaland would also fall. And it would put African troops right on the border of South Africa. And that's where they really want to get that man down there in South Africa. And the United States interests are involved in blocking this. Yes, some of these liberals who grin in your face like they're your best friends, they have money tied up in the Congo. Some of the most powerful political figures in this country come up, and governors over states have got interest in the Congo, and got interest in South Africa, and got interest all over the African continent, and go there. And as the Africans awaken and realize today, it makes them full of the incentive to never rest until that exploit is driven out.
Okay, we're going to stop here. Thank you for the comment.
Right. Appreciate you taking on the reading assignment for today. And I could tell that you listened to that speech a lot, the way that you were reading it. You sound just like Malcolm. This, again, I think like this particular excerpt that we were reading today is so relevant to what's happening today. I mean, we can talk about what's happening in Niger, how they really want to get down to those Africans in Niger, right now. Right. So before I pass it on to you, Tone, so we can get right into it, for the next 30 minutes, we'll be discussing what we've read. One of the things that stand out to me is Malcolm. He's highlighting the arm, one of the arms of the state, which is the media, and how it's used to manipulate the public against their own interests. And so, as Malcolm would say, the media will have us loving our enemies and hating our friends. So, in this time, in contemporary time, with so much going on around the world as it pertains to African people, and as we look to Africa right now, I think it's important that we tell our own narrative, that we have our own narrative, that we see what's happening through our own lens, because the colonizer is going to do its best to manipulate us against the interests, against our very interests, which is to liberate ourselves as African people, and to overthrow colonial capitalism, because that's what I see happening on the continent. And so I'll pass it on to you, Tone, and we can get into the questions and the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. As described, you would think that this speech is absolutely relevant today, as Ikemba alluded to. And so some of these questions we will unpack, not just what Malcolm was saying, but also the current context. I do want to ask Brother Khalid if he has any kind of immediate thoughts since he has read. If not, we can jump into the question.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about this particular segment, this particular portion of Malcolm's speeches, and really throughout all the speeches in their totality, because they start from a certain time period, and you can listen to, even though you may not see Malcolm, if you read and listen closely, you can see Malcolm X's development politically. Initially, Malcolm started out as a representative of the Nation of Islam, and most of his focus was on what we would call, in my circles, Muslim nationalism. In other words, the road to freedom and liberation for Black people exclusively was join the Nation of Islam. You join the Nation of Islam, you change your thinking, you change your life, you can be free, you can be liberated. From there, Malcolm developed a much more Black nationalistic type of politics, where he recognized it wasn't just the Nation of Islam, that there had to be a much broader based Black liberation movement. Perhaps the nation would be in the vanguard, would be in the leadership hub, but it had to encompass all Black people. So he started to reach out to and include in his narrative, in his speeches, and in his strategy, working with Black individuals and groups of all other shades of thought, even though he was a strong critique of the civil rights movement, civil rights leadership. And then the next stage for Malcolm, which I think is very interesting, and you hear it clearly, is he becomes more of a Pan-Africanist. And he realized the centrality of Africa and the centrality of the African diaspora to Black freedom and liberation. And last but not least, Malcolm becomes an internationalist, and he's able to cross all types of geographical and political lines and understand the interconnectedness between the struggles of African people, Black people throughout the diaspora, and the struggles of other oppressed people of color, and even people, non-people of color. And so you see him as an internationalist, as a Pan-Africanist, as a Black nationalist, and as a Muslim nationalist. And I think these speeches capture that if you pay very close attention and listen and follow that trajectory, and follow that type of trajectory.
Thank you for that. Excuse me, Brother Khalid. I agree, and it is very interesting to kind of follow Malcolm's growth and transition. And some of these reasons, I think Malcolm was growing with the times and the need, right? So the first question we're going to get into is in what ways does the media function to contain the Black liberation movement? And in what ways does the media protect the interests of colonialism? So we'll start with the first one. In what ways does the media function to contain the Black liberation movement? And for those who want to get on stack, feel free.
Hey, I can just add real quick, unless there's someone on stack.
So we have Jordan on stack.
Okay.
You can speak after. Thank you.
Is he on mute? I don't hear him if he's speaking.
Jordan, please unmute yourself. Okay. You can, but I think Jordan may have gotten booted. You can go, and if he comes back,
okay,
you can offer him.
Yeah, I think some of the ways that we see the media do that. I'm talking about all the media. For one, they make the Black, quote unquote, Black radical, seen as someone who is delusional, or they make a mockery, or what do you call that? A caricature, caricature. I just butchered that word, but I think caricature. I think I still butchered it, but y'all, what I'm saying of the revolutionary, Black revolutionary. And so what you have, and this goes back to even part of the program that they have to thwart what they call the Black extremists, right? With the program that they implemented, counterintelligence program, and in order to neutralize the Black liberation movement, was to get the leaders or the members of the Black liberation movement to get the public to create this tension or dissension between them and the Black public and the masses of Black people, and what they call how did they put it? The responsible Black, quote unquote, responsible Black people, right? And so they had to paint the Black a revolutionary, a freedom fighter, in a negative way. And so today, I think the media still does the same thing that they were doing in the 60s and 70s. I think they're, master that and portraying, and also not even bringing to light. I think another way is like they don't even, it's not their job to do so, but they don't cover the work that we are doing in the community of the Black, and I don't expect them to do so. That's why it's important that we have our own platforms. But you would think that these movements don't even exist. Black freedom fighters are still not out here organizing and putting in work and building institutions. You know, no matter how small or large they are, like the movement is still here. So, you know, when we have these conversations with people who are not privy to the movement, there's always these discussions about, you know, what are we doing, right? And I think that is, you know, a masterful job by the media of making it as if we're not here. And so that's their job, though. So it's not that I expect anything differently, but that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you for that. And I see that Jordan is back, and then Val's on stack after.
Thank you. Sorry, I lost service for a second. I wanted to kind of piggyback off what Ikemba is saying. I do believe that obviously there is a really good job of the media of downplaying the work that is happening currently or not covering it intentionally. But also I think that if we're going to look at, again, the propaganda that's coming out from media, like from Empire, we need to look at the fact that they have really push this narrative and this imagery that has allowed for field niggas to have house nigga aspirations, like as Malcolm would really just put it, right? Like there is the masses of us, the poor masses who in the 60s and the 70s knew they were struggling and were willing to fight back against Empire, now are hoping to be the next Jay-Z, right? The next Beyonce, they're going to be the next streaming, you know, millionaire. They all want to be an influencer and a superstar instead of fighting for our people, right? And I think we have to acknowledge that, right? I think that's probably the most masterful job that they've done, is creating this hyper-individualized capitalism where our face is our brand, right? And being able to make money off of our you know, social media presence gives us the ability to have power, right? And so and you know, when we surviving capitalism, so like it allows us to survive capitalism. And so I think those things kind of play into all of that, because just as much as they don't cover us, or they, you know, I think that they have convinced the masses of us that we don't need to fight, right? That this is what we're fighting for, a seat at their table. We're not fighting for our own table. And I was a lot, so I'm gonna just pass it.
Thank you for that. And to quote Jordan in his Medium article, who was quoting Malcolm, the media is the most powerful entity on the earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent, and that's power because they control the minds of the masses. So thank you for that, Jordan. I'm going to pass it to Val.
Peace, y'all. Tone, that was excellent. What you just left off. Stephen Biko said that the minds of the oppressed is their main weapon, the oppressor's main weapon. And so just speaking to some things that Malcolm spoke about in his last speech, he mentioned that the media will, criminalizes, Black people, so that even society looks at Black people as criminals and animals. Because you'll have a white person watching an ASPCA commercial. And for those who don't know what the ASPCA is, those are the folks that help, animals and, sick animals and animals that are being abused. They'll watch an ASPCA video and have tears in their eyes, but they'll watch George Floyd with a foot on his neck and just walk by like it don't matter. So it's not only they criminalize it to the point where it becomes dangerous, because now if a cop is beating on a Black person, it's okay because they're criminals, they're animals anyway, so they deserve it. So I think that obviously that plays out in the media every day. If you watch a newscast and a little boy gets shot or whatever by a cop, they start talking about or the shit that the little boy did in elementary school has nothing to do with the fact that he was killed by a cop. So I just wanted to point that out. What Malcolm said, how we're so vilified, and we're vilified. Speaking to what Akima spoke about, the Black liberation struggle. I mean, our political prisons are prime examples of how the Black liberation struggle was vilified and criminalized. And I always talk about, when we talk about Asada Shakur, we have to talk about Harriet Tubman, because Harriet Tubman was criminalized for freeing her people, and there was a bounty on her head, and there's a bounty on Asada's head right now. Mm-hmm. However, Harriet Tubman is now glorified in American media, but Asada Shakur can't come back home to see her daughter and her grandkids. So that's the contradictions. Thanks, y'all.
Ooh, very powerful, Val. Thank you so much for that. And I'm reminded of how the clouded message around our political prisoners, right? Like, they're treating them as though they're like quote unquote common criminals instead of freedom fighters. And this is what like the media is buying into. And if we read a lot like texts from Malcolm and such as like the COINTELPRO and other texts such as the COINTELPRO papers, we'll see that this is an intentional effort to not just kind of take people out, but distort the narrative, distort the message. That's really powerful. Thank you for that. I see Khalid on stack. Please share your thoughts before we go to our next question.
I know this is the 50th anniversary of the founding of hip hop, and so I want to make this statement, and I know it may offend some people, but I think that hip hop has been used, it has been weaponized. It's a highly effective cultural weapon in order to keep our people in a certain state of mind. Glorification of violence, misogyny, gross materialism, self-destructive behaviors. Hip-hop has been utilized and weaponized, and it's maintained a very strong position within the Black community and other communities of color for the last, at least for the last few decades or so. The power structure, the white power structure is supposed to do exactly what it's been doing. It's going to protect itself. It's going to defend its interests, and that's exactly what it is supposed to do. It's up to us to find ways to counter those attacks, and it's up to us to find ways to fight back. And the reason I wanted to kind of point to hip hop is because a lot of what's going on with our young people today culturally is a reflection of hip hop culture, as they have come to know it. And that's not to take away from the radical revolutionary hip hop artists from the past and those who exist today. But for the most part, the music business executives, they took it over, and they control mostly the messaging as well as the distribution. And they've been doing it quite powerfully for the last couple of generations. And now this is what we get, right? We have young people who know more about gangsterism than they know about revolutionary culture. And that's what they practice. That's what they look to. That's what they imitate. That's what they emulate. If revolutions are led by the young, we need to look at that. That's keeping it real. So the whole thing with culture, the media, we don't control the mass media. In order for us to get our messaging across, we got to fight hard. We got to fight real hard, even if it means some tough lessons and some tough discussions internally about what it means to control our messaging.
And so,
thank you for that, brother. Thank you for that, brother Khalid. I think that's right on the nose, because hip hop, similar to like sports, where Black people are kind of the face of it. We know they're puppeteers behind them. So like, I think it's 100% apropos to kind of call that out. And for folks who may take offense to that, though we know there's some conscious music, we know what's in the mainstream and we know what's pushed to the fore. So I think we need to take a critical look at what the messages are and who's controlling those narratives as you're describing. Brother Ikemba, I think you wanted to share something.
Yeah. So like going back to what Malcolm said in this speech, and he said, "Don't struggle within the ground rules of what the oppressor laid down." I'm paraphrasing, but don't struggle within the ground rules of the oppressor. And he talked about these rebellions that were taking place and how the media portrayed the Africans who were rebelling against the system of oppression as some sort of like vandals and terrorists. And I'm just thinking about today and the movements against repression and those organizations, those who are struggling against Cop City, those are the Uhuru Three, who are said to be working with the Russians. We should have a right to align ourselves with anyone we want to in the interest of African people. We should have the right to identify ourselves. As Dr. Mutulu Shakur was reading, I was reading earlier, and he said, my nationality is New African. He has that right. And I think that it just shows the hypocrisy of America when they create institutions and they create programs to thwart our movement to liberate ourselves. And this is, I think, like what Malcolm is like really getting to. And so these things that when they attempt to criminalize us to be free, I think it just exposes exposes the hypocrisy of America, and it also shows the crisis that this colonial state is in. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brother Ikemba. And I would even take that a step further. In the reading, Malcolm describes how not just the taking on an identity that we want to, but also a promotion of this being a problem, right? Using the propaganda machine to paint these identities as an issue. And that's where the narratives become clouded, right? Because we just are supposed to subscribe to these things are problematic, or they spell, like anti-us. So we unite with these narratives that you're saying here. We're going to move to our next question, which is, in what ways does the media project the interest of colonialism? So in the reading, Malcolm just kind of uplifts a number of ways that we see this. But how does this look like? What does this look like to you? So again, the next question is, in what ways does the media, and by media we're talking about mass media, influential media, promote the interest of colonialism?
Well, is anyone on stack?
Yes, Brother Khalid. So folks are taking just a bit to think about it. But Brother Khalid's on stack, and they can feel free to go after him.
Yeah, first of all, I think that we need to look at the media as an extension of colonialism. Right. So we don't need to separate. I mean, understand where Malcolm was coming from several decades ago in his descriptive analysis. But today, we need to look at the media as a protector and defender of its best interest. And its best interest is colonialism. Its best interest is colonial capitalism. Its best interest is to maintain the dominance of the United States empire. So we don't need to separate the two. We just need to figure out how it operates and how we can wage and how we can first develop and then wage our own counter offensive. Right? Again, I'm gonna keep coming back to this. A lot of this stuff is on us, right? We have a suppressed Black liberation movement, a fragmented Black liberation movement, and we have a failed social revolution, and we have a severely compromised and co-opted civil rights movement. And going back to hip hop, a lot of the hip hop culture originally came from out of the remnants and ashes of that. Right? The people of that generation who didn't benefit directly from the civil rights movement or what was perceived and promoted as the success of the civil rights movement. And because they didn't benefit from that, they were living up in the ashes of different parts of New York and in Philly and other places around the country. And they came up with their own thing, right? But that thing was co-opted. And so the media is not defending anything but its own interest. Its interest is colonialism. Its interest is capitalism. So why would it not defend it? Why would it not protect it? We should not expect anything but that, right? I think we need to look a little deeper and look at now, not so much colonialism, but in my humble opinion, the number one obstacle to any genuine Black liberation movement is neo-colonialism. Because, things have changed. The enemy is not as easily identifiable today as it was several decades ago, right? Now it's not just a Tashambi, now we have multiple Tashambis, right? On all different levels, not just the heads of state, but the people in city council, the people in the school boards, the people in the neighborhood development corporation. We have multiple Black and brown faces. They're Muslim, they're Christian, they're LGBTQ, they're women, multiple disguises, multiple pretenders, right? And so how do we educate ourselves and educate our people so we can navigate this? And how do we develop an offensive, pro-revolutionary type of counter-offensive to this onslaught? So the media is not defending capitalism. It's not defending colonialism. The media is colonialism. It is capitalism.
Mm.
Thank you, Brother Khaled. That's powerful. I want to just name that Ikemba, and then Jordan is on that. But just something Brother Khaled was describing that I think it's appropriate to say it is on us, right? To understand the media is not objective, that they represent a particular interest as described. Thank you for that. Brother Ikemba and then Brother Jordan.
Yeah, I unite. I was going to touch on that as well. I would just say if we think about the Black liberation movement, we understand that the colonizer is using the institutions to maintain the colonial state and maintain their control over the colonized. And so when we look at within our movement, we create institutions to counter that. We develop our own schools, we develop our own media, right? And so it's important when we look at it, just have that understanding. So, because it's not complex, we create these institutions to help put forth our agenda and to work in the interest of African people to liberate ourselves. They're going to work in the interest of the colonizers, going to build institutions to put forth their interests and work to maintain their control over people. So it's the same thing going on, but the only difference is we're fighting to liberate ourselves, and they're building institutions and they're fighting to keep us under their boot. So I just wanted to add that. So the media is definitely wherever it was at any point. Brother Khalid talked about hip hop. I mean, we look at the media and look at mass media and how mass media, helped to at least at one point, at least it allowed for the masses of people to become privy to what was going on, and they were able to dismantle certain, I would say, institutions, or at least counter, some forms of oppression. Not saying it was a revolution that took place, but the colonizer was able to see, okay, I can use this media and capture the media, and was able to use the media in its own interests. And so that's where we are now. And we just have to be very conscious of that.
Thank you for that. We have 5 minutes left. I want to give Jordan an opportunity.
I think that everything is propaganda, right? And so understanding that, like you said, we're at war, right? African people and Europe and her African allies and her, right, like you said, neo-colonial puppets are at war with us. And that's how it's always been. And so everything that we do is propaganda, from the clothes that we wear to what we watch. All of it is constantly trying to convince us of something, right, of some ideology, right, to sway either more towards an African viewpoint or more towards, right, a European viewpoint, really within capitalism. And so as we build those institutions, that's why it's so important that they're supported, right, and given like the proper love, right, and I guess intention, right. So we have a school here in Sacramento, right, and to me that should be important to everyone, because we understand how critical it is that we have these schools all over, and if we can get one here, we can get it anywhere, right? And so I think that those things are important, uniting on how, like you said, we're not going to all be the same, but we have a common enemy, we have a common fight. How do we come together and say these things need to be built for us because we're at war with them, right? How do we align ourselves, just like what's happening currently, right, in West Africa and throughout the continent, and how folks are fighting and resisting. And so we see that when we come together, how much stronger we are. And again, that's with anything. That's with our literature, right? That's with our poets. Look, we have a Black poet laureate. So, like, of course, hip hop is co-opted. Anything that we do can be stolen from us in this fight, right? Because again, we're at war. So any weapon that we have, if it falls into the hands of the enemy, can be used. And the same with us. So we also have to be strategic with how we can utilize their media to strike them or our audience, our target audience from them as well. So I think those are the things that we have to be critical of and take into consideration, analyze, and be able to move forward in this fight.
Thank you for that, Jordan. I want to read what Brother Jalil Muntaqim put in the chat. A fundamental aspect of what was read is how El-Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz understood the class divide and the capitalist exploitation of the new African community. It is imperative we begin to focus on class struggle towards building national unity. The narrative must have some clarity towards specific goals and objectives to achieve. The media is known as the fourth estate. It is an arm of the corporate government, and as a corporation, I guess its primary interest is reaping profits for its stakeholders. The stakeholders are the capitalist class, majority of whom are white and racist. Therefore, the news narrative appeals to this demographic in the cycle of capitalist exploitation that negatively impacts our lives. The media is a corporate entity, supports the genocide of Black, brown, and indigenous people. Thank you for that, Brother Jalil. And I want to say we're going to close shortly, so Ikemba, please have the last word. But I do want to welcome people back here on Thursday as we unpack the Ballot of the Bullet speech, which we'll put in the chat for everyone to kind of follow along if you want to follow along ahead of time. But thank you for all that who have contributed today and who have joined us. Brother Ikemba, do you have any closing remarks?
Yes, I'm just going to echo what Tone said. Thanks everybody for joining. Make sure you like, share, so people can check out the replays. Also subscribe if this is your first time joining us. We'll be back here Thursday again, covering the ballot or the bullet. Continue to commemorate Black August, freedom fighters, resistance movements, freedom fighters today continuing to resist. And also make sure you're uplifting our political prisoners. Make sure that you are uplifting our political prisoners. Free them all. Free them all. Make sure we continue to recognize that there are people today. New political prisoners are being made even today. So even when we talk about political prisoners, we're not even just talking about those of the 60s and 70s. I know people who during the Mike Brown, the George Floyd uprising, who have been incarcerated as a result of their alleged participation in whatever. So just wanted to say that, make sure that we continue to uplift and make sure we get people around the world to acknowledge that there are political prisoners in the United States of America. So with that being said, we charge colonialism. Follow us on all media platforms. And appreciate everybody who joined on Zoom to be a part of this discussion. And, Baba or Ndugu Jalil, who wrote that statement in a comment. His book, We Are Our Own Liberators. It's a great read. Read it twice. I want to encourage people to get that book. Brother Khalid, I have to get your book. I haven't read it. I know you have a couple of books out, which I want to at least uplift one to know. I know we talked about it in our last meeting. Panthers That Makes a Lot, Memoirs of Incarceration, Survival and Resistance, 1971-1981. So I need to read that. So with that being said, appreciate you all joining us, and until next time, peace. Uhuru.